Welcome, fellow travelers, to the Never Ending Adventure podcast. I'm so happy to be back. I'm Russell Tyndall, as always, and with me, as always, as well, is my best good buddy, DJ Netty P.
Netty P.
Netty P. How are you doing today? You doing pretty well?
I'm good, man. It's been a good, chill weekend. We're recording on a Sunday. We just got 2 episodes up and ready to go for this week.
Oh, man.
And I got an iPhone 15 yesterday. Just did the little upgrade.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Fancy.
I know.
Well,
they gave me a huge credit for my old phone. So I was like, and I'm not super pumped about it, but I was like, I might as well. If you're going to, they literally gave me as much money as I bought my old phone for to trade it in. I was like, okay, I'll take that all day.
Man, that's great. Yeah, shoot, we need to get on that the video content. Maybe for the Patreon, we can start doing something like that. Who knows? But man, that's cool, Ned. I don't know how I feel about this. I thought I was going to be really excited for this one, but then when you said we should watch The Winter King, the 2023 series, 2023 series, The Winter King, about a British historical fiction television series based on what's his name, Bernard Cornwell's The Warlord Chronicles novels. I was just kind of confused why you wanted to do that. I thought we were on Fionna and Cake, and we were watching through Fionna and Cake. But so I watched the first episode of The Winter King, despite it having a 5.4 on IMDb. What are you laughing at?
This is from 2023?
Yeah. Isn't that what we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea what you're talking about, but we can do it.
Hold on. Wait a second. We need to pause this because I watched The Winter King. It looks like the next Fionna and Cake episode is also called that. Just give me one moment. Hold on. And we're back. All right, now I'm ready. I've watched the Winter King episode. It's way better than that other thing that Ned had me watching, or I thought he had me watching.
I still have no idea what you're talking about. It's just some obscure show that's going on.
Yeah, it's just some random show that when I looked up The Winter King for the first time it came up, I was like, I'm going to do a bad bit. So here we are. That's what I just did. A bad bit.
Of the Fionna and Cake episode, how you feeling?
There we go.
Feel pretty good?
How am I feeling? Yeah, of course. Dude, the freaking Fionna and Cake series has been fantastic. Everything about it. I think every episode has been memorable in some form.
Maybe exactly.
I mean, there are moments that aren't necessarily with I'm still torn on how I feel about the Cake and Squirrel episode.
I feel like that felt filler-y, introduce you to the magic universe.
But it's fun. Yeah, it's a fun episode. Nothing against it. And we got to see a part that will come up and be very important toward the end of this episode with the Hot Dog Night number 7. So that was a fun little hey, remember that? If you caught that in the first time we saw it happen, well, man, things aren't exactly how you would hope them to be. And things are definitely getting messed up. And maybe they are a sort of virus for this new universe.
Yeah,
but we can get all...
Scared through this episode is calling them the Abomination. And so I think they're kind of somewhat of an antithesis of a structured multiverse. And it could essentially start severing ties between everything. It's either that or
that's definitely what's happening. Well, I think that's for sure what's happening.
Prismo Golb magic from, Fionna and Cake stripped down magic to non-magic world. Whatever curse that was from Golb is being able to be extended into other universes. They're carrying that virus.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the way I'm looking at it, just being new to Adventure Time and being only through season 5, it seems to me that, they're just causing some sort of a structural degradation of reality, right? Mm-hmm. Because their reality is not supposed to mix with the other realities as it is the crossover that occurred. And that is an issue. And that's why it should not happen. That's why Prismo should not allow this to occur. Mm-hmm. And so that's why at moments when their reality, being them physically, are touching other things and other realities, which they should not be, that's when you get these glitches that takes away the magic. In their reality, there is no magic right now. So they're touching this thing that is magical, and then all of a sudden it becomes not magical.
Yeah, I think that's the virus aspect. If they were affected, or Simon was affected by Golb's stripping down, And then, so we're Fionna and Cake's universe, that if they escape their universe, they can inherently virus it up. But I do have actually, I think it was right after we recorded the last episode, was watching this one for the first time, and I had a super, super, super deep, theoretically speaking, but I want to save that for the end because we have a lot to break down here, and I don't want to get bogged down too early on in our discussion on my super deep theory. But okay. I figured this episode, if we don't digest it, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, that we need to separate it into two courses and kind of start with our Marshall Lee and Gary kind of story here, because it's a little bit simpler, but it's great. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of the episode, but then get into kind of everything else that Fionna and Cake are up to. If that works for you.
No, that works great. I'd be happy to talk about them. I think they have a really fun storyline. I think their energy works really well together. It feels very natural. The entire non-date, but definitely a date kind of thing that they have going on. I mean, it's cute, man. It's really sweet to see, and I haven't really seen it play out with Princess Bubblegum yet and Marceline, except for when they're being mad at each other. But is there a lot of parallels? Did you feel like the way that they're shown feels very reflective of PB and Marceline?
Yeah, it's unless we really go into a lot of the episode from Distant Lands, which kind of describes and tells the story a little bit more of their first breakup before like kind of the Adventure Time series. A lot of, I think, the reasons why they're together in the first place is shown in this episode. So I think that this one's fun because it's kind of like proxy watching how Marceline and Princess Bubblegum first got together, and kind of watching like just like the slight flirtations and, like you said, the date, but it's not a date. I like to kind of just imagine that the parallel with Marcy and Bubblegum is like similar when they were like just early on, not dating, but oh my gosh, like you're in my friend's shower. What are you doing here? Because again, remember
to meet somebody too.
Remember how Marceline, when we first get introduced to her, she's like, I've had all these homes and I've had all these adventures and I carved my name and everything. And we see that just with Gary off the get-go, that he's showering at Fiona's place.
Marshall.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Marshall is showering at Fiona's
I did the same
place.
thing in my mind. Yeah, it's crazy. And also, I mean, I guess Marceline knows LSP and the main series, but LSP is also in the apartment, just like under the bed, I guess. I don't know what he's doing necessarily.
I loved that, because that's the goofiness that if we get too serious with the series and if we get way too canonical, we miss those little moments that make Adventure Time, which is Ellis coming out from under the bed being like, bring me back something.
Yeah, I'll take some of those cookies as well. Because, I mean, hey, man, they were really freaking good. And Marshall was like, wait a second, Are you the baker? Are you the person who made those cookies for Fionna? Because we need to hang out. And he's so smooth this whole episode as far as like his flirting and stuff. I mean, he's just on top of it. He knows where to go with the next sentence or whatever. And even when he messes up toward the end of their date, right? And he brings in the lemon carbs.
The lemon carbs.
He has a moment where he's just like, oh man, I'm so sorry about that. I shouldn't have sprung that on you. Like, you clearly feel like you're not ready for it yet. And I mean, it worked out though, fortunately. I mean, it gave Gary this justification where Gary felt like, I could tweak this recipe forever. I'm a perfectionist. I got to figure out what the heck to do with this recipe of the pastries that I'm making. And the lemon carbs, that was the one thing that they were like, hey, it tastes good. Like, the taste is there. We're happy about that.
Everything.
I hate the faces. The faces suck.
They missed the one opportunity for the lemon carbs to say these cookies are unacceptable. Like, they missed a complete opportunity right there. And I was waiting for it the whole time.
That felt purposeful. That's like, that's a very I mean, the low-hanging joke, right? Me doing the stupid bit at the beginning of this episode, like, they're better than me. They're better comedy writers than I am. And they're not going to hit that low-hanging fruit over time. I guess maybe also like not nod to Justin Roiland. Who knows? Like, maybe they just wanted that to live in its own little world. But maybe what's so good though is this freaking Fionna and Cake, man. I mean, again, talking about the writing of this, they did such a good job. I don't want to. We'll wait till we get over to Simon and Winter King and all that. But you feel like you're going one way, and you're like, oh, easy explanation. I know what's going on, and then, oh no, here's a little twist. Here's a little extra thing that's going on. You feel someone's sus, but then like you realize they are sus, but not in the way that you thought they were. And they keep doing this with these episodes, and it's really fascinating the way that they've structured a lot of the episodes of this series. But anyway, so I'm excited. I think this whole episode's fantastic.
Yeah, it's almost hard. I'm like, I feel like I'm doing the same thing. I'm hyperventilating, trying to like put all of my words into slow sentences and not just like mouth word vomit everywhere too. But
oh my gosh,
I think one of my favorite parts of Marshall and Gary's side story is when they go to the candy town or the bad part of town. He's like, I don't think this is not really your part of town, man. He's got this like black market monochromicorn dealer of candy that's got all the best
candy
candies.
Supply.
Yeah, and I love that was kind of like the little monochromicorn nod at that. And Marshall thinks that that's cool, that he's got like this kind of like back alley candy supplier where all the good stuff is. And then he decides to, they go on their date thing, and then he breaks into the bakery, and Marshall's like, dude, that's like super punk, man. and I love that, because I think that that's why Marcy and PB work out, is that Marcy thinks that she's so cool, and that Princess Bubblegum's this, perfect perfectionist and got a fluffy, sugary, sweet life. But Princess Bubblegum's got that somewhat dark side, the edgy side. And that's what I think attracts Marceline to Princess Bubblegum, is that she is real at the end of the day. She's like an honest person, and she's, messes up and does punk things. And it's those little moments through Adventure Time where you see Marcy get kind of big eyes for PB. And then same with, I think, Marshall. Marshall's like, dude, this guy's like cool. He's not like as lame as I expected him to be.
That whole scene was so good with the best cocoa powder or whatever that, Marshall tries, and he's just like, holy crap, you weren't kidding. Like, this is really fantastic. And then you go almost immediately, Gary goes off into his kind of rant, which I think we've seen him do before in that first episode, where he's talking about his 64-step business plan, where he's got to perfect his recipe, right? Then he's got to get a bakery and impress the limit. Like, he knows where he's going. He's so passionate about food and about baking. And that's what really impresses Marshall. Like that, I think that's the first moment, because there was obviously some attraction or whatever in that very beginning scene. But Marshall is like, I'm so impressed with how passionate this person is about this thing that they do. And it did remind me a lot about, my personal first date with my partner, where, we were talking, and one of our main conversations that we had that first date was about our passions. It was me talking about music. It was her talking about fashion and about costuming, and then how our passions kind of collided, where like there's a history of fashion and music constantly like being in the same place at the same time, with the punk scene, with disco, with grunge. There's just so many moments, and the hippie movement and stuff, and all that comes with both fashion and music, and the passion that we both have toward this thing. And even though her interests aren't my passions necessarily, it was really cool to see how into it that she is. And
well, both attractive. Of y'all are attracted because you value that dynamic of being so passionate about a purpose of any sort of purpose, and having a direction for your life. That having a partner that lacked in that quality is a turnoff for probably both of you guys. Now I
think Marshall has that. Marshall sees that too, right?
Marshall has that with his music, and Marshall sees that in Gary with his baking, that Gary's got that same passion. But Marshall does seem a little bit more like, again, like Marceline, lackadaisical, let the world kind of, the current of the world take me where I need to be, and I'll be fine. And that kind of structure is one of the things that Marshall lacks. And again, probably one of the whole things where like, hey, I wish I was a little bit more, I wouldn't say more passionate, but more like take my passion and construct it into a 64-step plan,
they could balance each other out. Maybe there's a way that Gary can help him come up with that 64-step plan.
And that's what you're probably missing with the context of the rest of PB and Marceline's relationship, is that dynamic of Marceline always taking PB's vision for a perfect world and going like, it's okay that it's not perfect. And that's what Marshall does with Gary in this episode. But then Princess Bubblegum always telling Marcy, like, you are so much more like special and valuable, and you're not just this kind of like floating atom out in the universe. Like, you have a purpose and you have a meaning. And I see that, and being able to be seen in that way, that's probably like what Marshall is starting to see, is like, somebody sees me as more than just like the hobo playing music on the street or something like that, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, it's no wonder, man. I mean, talking about them in this episode, Gary is my lovely for this episode. I couldn't help but give it to him. Yeah, he's just so likable. I can't help but be like, man, Gary just seems like the chillest dude. I would love to hang out with him. I mean, really, Marshall is more chill, but in a different way, right? And I was definitely in on the idea of the pastry mention, which is his whole thing about like, there's this underlying story between the candies. When you buy the cocoa berry, you get Mr. Cupcake, because they're married.
Because they're married.
You know, like you buy one, get the other one cheaper, or like these people like they butt heads, you know. So if you're buying that one, it's going to be. I mean, the
flavors would clash or something like that. Yeah,
some storyline of like, oh, I don't know. I just thought it was so fascinating and such a good, like, just random, like on the spot presentation that he had to give. And I don't know. It was weird that it was like. On the other hand, we're just seeing Fionna and Merc just constantly all these Candy Kingdom characters, but no, I mean he won me over with just everything in this episode. I thought he was a really great character.
I love that moment too, and I love the fact that he's your lovely for that reason specifically. But the pastry mention aspect of this episode, I love it. I think it's the writers nodding to themselves about they created a world of crazy critters and stretchy dogs and candy people and penguins in the Ice Kingdom, and they put storylines around it that made people really care, you know? So I think that that's really cool that the writers are like, we've created this thing that now people like love. And maybe when it was first introduced, people hated it because they were like, well, why would I give a fuck about little candy people and Slumber Party Panic in the first season when it's first introduced? Maybe the writers again were frustrated, just like Gary was. And as it kind of developed organically, it didn't have to be perfect when it was delivered the first time, but as the show developed organically and the audience, you know, us as the lemon carbs in this situation, once we learned more of the story, we loved the dynamic more. Again, kind of your difference between starting the show off going, I don't know what you've gotten me into, and then now getting into season 5 being like, shoot, dude, I'm sold on, you know, I'm invested now in what's going to happen with Cinnamon Bun, you know, invested. Things like that.
Yeah, that's great, dude. I don't know. It's good. I don't know if I have too many more deep thoughts about their date and all that stuff. I mean, I like the fact that they went to a records and cookbook store. I mean, outdoor store, right? And Marshall Lee holds up a record that says Vampire Queen, which is just too good. I mean, it's such a great band name. But then even talking about how smooth he is, I mean, at the end of the episode, Marshall brings that back up about the chocolate dipped strawberry. Like, so where does a chocolate dipped strawberry go to meet a cupcake anyways? Which is just the perfect two characters to describe them to, probably. And immediately Gary's like, well, let me tell you about Slumber Party Panic, episode 1 of Adventure Time.
I love the callback. Then I'm going to get to my bigger, theoretically speaking, but it plays into the very end scene of Marshall and Gary, and it plays into the end scene of Fionna and Cake's little aspect of the story. But before we move on, we're going to take a quick breather and collect our thoughts. But there is one huge dynamic, again, of this beginning of this relationship that almost went over my head when I watched this episode is when Gary talks about the lemon carbs, and he's like, I want to put this in front of these investors and they're awesome. Gary's like, he seems sad and he's like, yeah, I think my mom's told me about them before. And you got to remember, Gary at the beginning of the show was like, I'm not speaking with my mom right now. We're not on talking terms. And that the biggest like gesture of why that was a huge deal is the fact that he calls his mom up for the first time.
He was willing to do it.
And he's willing to do it for Gary. And that's kind of like probably why this was a really emotional scene for Marshall, because he put himself on the line. He became really vulnerable by breaking that whatever feud he had with his mom, and doing that for Gary, and then it not working out. Even personally speaking, man, when that kind of thing happens in my life, when I really put my heart on my sleeve for somebody, or I really go out of my way to do something for somebody and it doesn't work out. And that's anything from like smoking a 12-hour like pork butt and it tasting like ass, or, driving out of the way for somebody, and them just being like, oh yeah, like, just kidding, we're not hanging out. And I'm like, dude, I just drove an hour. It gets to me. And the fact that Marshall turns around and is totally unfazed and was just like, jumps right back into that conversation that, I need to care about Gary in this situation.
Even with Gary being like, oh, I'm sorry, am I boring you? Which is another thing where that could throw him off as well. But I think you're right. I think Marshall just has incredible emotional intelligence throughout this whole episode, and his ability to juggle those feelings and then get back and then at the same time empathize and be like, oh, no, it's cool. Like, I'm not bored. Like, you're not boring me at all. I actually find your passion for this thing really cool, which is what inspired him, right, to go on that ledge. That's a great freaking point, Ned. That was so cool.
Yeah, like I said, it took me 2 times watching it, and then watching a bunch of people's reviews on it. And I'm like, what did I miss? And I was like, oh gosh, that was such a huge part of their storyline, was that. Yeah. And what I imagine is going to happen as we kind of dive into their relationship deeper is that Marshall's going to get very vulnerable, and then Gary's not going to reciprocate perfectly. And it's going to make Marshall very mad, and they're going to get into some sort of feud or spat, because that's kind of the PB and Marcy dynamic too, is that Marcy, as soon as she becomes vulnerable, she's been hurt her entire life. She's been let down her entire life by a lot of people that she surrounds herself with after opening up. And then that's why she just recloses herself off over and over and over again. And so I think that there's going to be something where, with Marshall's music, and Gary doesn't show up to like a show or a coffee shop show, and he's going to be like, well, like, dude, I did all this stuff for you, and all I needed was somebody to be there. And I think Gary's going to have to do a lot of, Gary's kind of over in his own universe a little bit. He's kind of, tunnel visioned, and that this is going to widen Gary's perspective on, hey man, it's, maybe Marshall's not part of my 64-step plan. So maybe I need to make it a 65-step plan, Yeah,
start adapting it. Oh, man. Ned, you're crushing it today. Well,
yeah, dude, take a break. Let's capture what you're doing. This might be one of my favorite episodes so far. Like, it was so much information and emotional overload that I don't know how I'm going to make it to the end of the show without just like peeing myself on the podcast.
I do really hope we get that far into this series. Like, I hope they give it enough episodes to where we can develop what's going on with them a little bit further. And you have a slope downward and then a nice like finale to their relationship or whatever it is, to where it's like, oh, here's their conclusion. We're good now. But some sort of an emotional roller coaster. Some
things
have
to get worse before they get better.
Because it's almost
we're seeing that. We're seeing that
with
we're seeing that with Fionna and Cake's universe, which we'll talk about next. But we need to see that happen with Marshall and Gary's. Things are going to have to get worse, and again, that's going to make us way more emotionally invested in those characters for sure. But let's take a breather before I extend the first half of this podcast to 50 minutes itself. So.
Yeah, sounds good.
Back after a very, very short break, but and I like to break it up like that. It gets us a little bit more like, okay, clear, unbold the notes. What else we got to talk about? But man, Fionna and Cake in this episode, I feel like the funniest part about this side of the episode is we didn't get a lot of Fionna, in my opinion. Like, a lot of action Fionna, but way less dialogue than we're used to.
Yeah, this feels like a Simon-centered episode. I mean, it's Simon meeting another Simon, right? And having probably way more questions than we get to see him actually ask. He's just kind of in amazement for most of the episode. And
he's like frozen
at the end.
Pun intended. He is a little frozen, I think, with like having to digest this of, okay, like, if this was a possibility in my universe, he's probably feeling very jealous. He's probably feeling like,
totally.
Or like if I'd been Ice King a little bit longer. And at the end of the day, he is trying to become Ice King again. And he's really curious. Like, if I can become Ice King again, how can I be this kind of Ice King, this normal guy Ice King, who we realize is not really normal at the end of the day. But it's more and more of this let's make you feel empathetic towards Simon, but I think he's got to get himself off like up by his bootstraps at some point in the show and stop kind of doing this like wallowing in self-pity,
kind of moping around.
And honestly, I think we're kind of starting to see, and where the show might be going is his obsession with Betty is almost unhealthy. Like maybe it's like very much with tapping into evil gold magic. That was pretty unhealthy, and murdering Choose Bruce or Choose Goose.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, plus you have the principles in my mind. I mean, thinking back to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is an anime that I don't think you've seen yet, where the whole thing is like, it's the creation of matter. Like, you can't create matter out of nothing. You have to have some sort of a sacrifice or some sort of a thing that turns into another thing, right? So if you want to bring someone back from the dead, that requires quite the trade. And this is the same thing in this world, right? Like, I think there's a curse to bringing someone back anyways. I mean, even if we're looking at Prismo and Prismo trying to do something through a wish, there's a monkey's paw aspect to it. And so I think he needs to find a way to like mourn for the death and move on. I don't think she would want him to suffer like this and forever be in this like terrible mental state. I think it's time for Ice King or Simon to grow past this. And I think he's accepting, right, which is what's scaring me a little bit, is he's accepting that, oh, if I just don the crown again, I'll be crazy. But then like my mind will be off Betty and I'll be happier again.
Yeah.
And so
there once that is a numbing effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
it's
not
like an unhealthy way. Yeah. So I'm really curious to see where this is going. And I'm kind of glad he felt vindicated at the end of this episode, but it's certainly, I don't know, it left me feeling a little bit uneasy with where we're going with Simon for the rest of this series.
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, they want you to feel uneasy. They want you to kind of feel that this plan that they're concocting to make Simon crazy again and Fiona just wants to have adventures again is not going to end exactly. It's not going to be like, great, he's magic and great, we went back to our universe and so is the world now. But I just watched the new DC Flash movie, which was like, I went in with low expectations, and so it was a little better than I expected, but still kind of just poor writing at the end of the day. But this one gets into time travel and multiverse and the DC multiverse that they're trying to create, which they're creating it really weird as well. But one of the concepts of time travel is creating, those alternate time branches. But Michael Keaton's Batman in that one is explaining, okay, you just travel back in time, you created a new branch. However, time doesn't work like a tree where everything branches out perfectly. It's like a bowl of spaghetti. And that all these timelines you're creating will end up overlapping at similar places. And, that pretty much all these overlaps are the similarities, the inevitables in all the universes. And so I love that I just watched that with this show, that there does seem to be a number of inevitables in this show. PB and Marcy kind of having some sort of crossover dynamic. Finn's character, the portrayal of Finn's character always being heroic, are these inevitables in all the multiverses.
Are you saying that baby Finn doing a fist bump at the end of the episode was heroic?
Absolutely. You know that baby Finn is the most heroic baby in the babyverse. Like,
easily. I mean, there's a freaking baby Lich, which is another constant, right? There's a baby Lich in every universe.
I got more to say about that because that opens up a can of worms on where the show is going to go. And we're going to be releasing this when the Lich is coming back. I already kind of got a spoiler.
Oh no! Did you really?
Thanks to the assholes on Instagram where I'm just scrolling reels and it's like, big spoiler in the first 2 seconds of a video.
Gotta get off reels, dude. What the heck?
But it was like a lot of them have been like spoilers for this episode. And I quickly change it, and then just one guy was like 2 seconds into the video, like,
I don't want to know.
No, you don't want to know. But it actually goes back to the theory I had a few episodes ago when we saw the Lich in the Steamboat Willie universe, that it's important. Now we see baby Lich in the background of the babyverse, but just sitting there waiting. And it's creepy, but I think it's important. So I'll get to my final. That is my part of my final, theoretically speaking. So
yeah. Well, I want to talk about the Winter King, Ned. Let's talk about the Winter King.
Tell me about what you thought about his musical number.
Well, I freaking adored his musical number. I want to just say that the voice actor, did you recognize? I mean, are you familiar with the voice actor?
It didn't like spark any fires in my head.
It may not. It may not, because I don't think you're a big or not as big of a YouTube guy as I am. I feel like I'm constantly watching stuff on YouTube, but there's a guy from Polygon, or at least that's where I know him from. It was a channel, and they also rate and review video games and stuff. But Brian David Gilbert from Polygon is the Winter King, and dude, he freaking crushes it. But if you want to get into Brian David Gilbert at all, this isn't my rec, but he's hilarious. He read all 337 books in Skyrim, so you don't have to, you know. He has a wonderful video about Waluigi, which I highly recommend. And then Pokemon Edibility is another one that I really enjoyed, where he's diving into, what eating Pokemon and what they would taste like or whatever.
I've seen his TikTok then before. Yes. But that's his voice as the
it
wizard,
is. And as soon as it was pointed out to me, it was so obvious. It was like the most obvious thing. And it wasn't distracting, but I was certainly like, I love that he got the opportunity to be a part of this Adventure Time series.
That's cool. So and especially if he was a super fan too, to kind of be around.
Yeah, I don't know. He may have been. I'm not sure, but he's just so good. I want to see him in more things. I want to hear his voice in more things because it works great, and he can sing. Yeah, like what you're saying.
And I think that this is cool. It's a cool awesome musical montage. One, because the song's actually great. I loved the song.
It's my tops.
This is the tops. Okay, great tops.
It's my tops for the episode. Yeah, the song is fantastic. I mean, it's very catchy. It's
very like Broadway-esque too. It gives it. Adventure Time has so many songs that feel way more like random and improvisational. This was like a spot-on performance of a Broadway show, and it was so non-Adventure Timey, but it fit, you know.
Yeah, and it explains a little bit, like we get a little bit of background, like he beat the crown by sheer force of will, sort of. I mean, really, he just redirected what was causing him. But the fact that he was able to do that, I mean, there was some will involved, right? In order to redirect where the craziness, the madness was going.
Some ice ninja power.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Simon asked him, like, it's hard to resist the crown's power. Like, how'd you do that? And the Winter King kind of laughs it off. He's like, come now. Making something wonderful is as easy as manifesting your own reality.
I love that line.
So fascinating because it's not easy to manifest your own reality. I think it's something to pursue, to try. But I mean, if your reality is fake, it makes it a whole lot easier to manifest your own reality, which is what Winter King essentially did. And another way of doing that would be taking advantage of others, which again is what the Winter King essentially did. He manifested his own reality in a negative way and a not so good way.
Yeah. It was interesting if he's that, I don't know, sneaky, that he is willing to help Simon that up front. Like, I'll just make another copy of the crown. Like, you think he'd have maybe something that was more maniacal planned out, I guess, but maybe not. Maybe he is now just as good as, prime Princess Bubblegum is that he's just.
No, I mean, that's a great question. No, I think that really is a good question. Like, what is his motivation for wanting to help them create the new crown? I mean, is it loneliness? Is he just narcissistic? And he's like, because he in this episode is constantly trying to be like, how great am I? Like, Cake, I'm helping people. What do you want? What do you need from me? I can
grant you anything you want. Yeah, it does introduce that the PB mentality of like always ask how, never ask why. Like, oh, can I do this? Can I create another crown? That it just feeds his own narcissism. That like, oh yeah, everybody loves me because I can do everything for them. I can fix all the problems.
Maybe so. Maybe it's guilt that drives him. I mean, as we'll get into Ice Marceline and stuff like that in a moment.
Let's just get into that, man.
Well, I want to finish up about the song real fast, if you don't mind.
And the song. Sorry,
go back to the song.
The song, yeah. Well, what do you think about the animation? Because I've got a thought about it.
Yes, the animation is exactly what I wanted to talk about because the watercolor animation style is beautiful. We've only seen it one other point in this little mini series, which was during the dream sequence that had the ice prince in it for Fiona, right? She's dreaming and that very first scene of the very first episode. And that's so curious to me because, and again, it's another version of Ice King or Ice Prince, what she ends up calling the Winter King at the end of this episode. But I asked Allie about, because she's more into art history and stuff, and in her opinion, watercolor isn't necessarily used for as like a hyper realistic art style. And it's really fascinating that in this reality, this not realistic reality where things aren't as they seem, aren't as good as they seem, has it truly overcome the will of the crown? The crown's still constantly giving a little bit of influence onto all his decisions and how he thinks. Yeah, I mean, perhaps that's true. Perhaps the art style is used to demonstrate how kind of too good to be true everything is.
That is,
I mean, what are your thoughts?
He's manifesting his own reality, and his reality is displayed as watercolor, but it's really not as pretty or realistic as it actually is. And so, that's a great way to put it. I didn't even think about that. All I could think about was, for my fans out there, we've got a whole episode later down the road in Adventure Time where it's just about like caterpillars and butterflies and bugs, and they do it all in water. And it's odds are it's in a different Adventure Time universe, and they just did a special episode on it. And another one where Finn and Jake like dive into like the mermaid's grotto, or that they're hunting a sea lard in their pond in the backyard, and they pop into kind of this different world where everything is like that watercolor animation. So they've used this in the show before, so I love kind of that animation callback to those episodes. However, the caterpillar butterfly episode is probably top 5 least favorite episodes of all time. So it didn't necessarily bode well for me on my first watch. And I was like, it just got me the bad feels that old episode brought me.
Yeah. Well, dude, it's a really cool song, and it's easily my tops for the episode. I don't know what it's called. Winter Wonderland, maybe.
I think it's Winter Wonder World. Because he keeps saying Winter Wonder World. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm just thinking of a freaking Walking in a Winter Wonderland.
I think they had to changed it so it wouldn't be Winter Wonderland.
yeah. That's silly of me. But I love Cake. Again, she was my lovely, I guess, last episode, because she was kind of egging on the romance and trying to get the tea or whatever. And she's just like, kiss each other. And Winter King goes, don't think it hasn't occurred to me.
Which again, kind of like what you said, some of the madness leaking over. He seems a little unhinged still. And I was like, that's the only thing that doesn't parallel perfectly with him and our prime Princess Bubblegum, is that this Ice King still seems somewhat a little mad and unhinged. So it's maybe a little bit of that madness kind of coming back, narcissism and madness at the same time.
Yeah, maybe so.
Getting to that, again, the madness aspect of it. And I'm sure that I want to talk about Marceline just before we run out of time at all. And all we see is little Ice Marcy playing on a real bass, her real, axe bass. And then at the end of the episode, when Fiona's Prismo magic, whatever we want to call it now, zaps the magic out, she's melted. And they do a very dramatic, almost still shot on her being melted. So I thought about it myself and looked into some fan theories. And I think
there's an easy theory here. Yeah, it feels very clear what happened to me. I mean, maybe it's wrong. Maybe I have some aspects of it wrong. But you're welcome to say it if you want to.
Yeah. There's a couple of theories that play into larger theories, but obviously the easy ones are that once Simon, or the Ice King, transfers his madness over to Princess Bubblegum, and she becomes the Candy Queen, and he becomes the Winter King, that Marcy gets really mad at him and tries to defeat him, and he's either 1, killed her, or 2, like frozen her in ice, and locked her away or whatever. So he also then would have maybe felt guilty, because that's like his longest friendship, and that would probably be a consistent in this universe, that they had some sort of beginning, and that he manifested an Ice Marcy to deal with his guilt, put her in the image of how he wants to remember her. And that's exactly the reason why when Simon says, hey, do you remember Betty? He's like, oh yeah, well, once you have a crown, you can just create an Ice Betty, and that'll solve the problem. So it's kind of like backing up
but
that
it's
theory.
Unethical.
Yeah, it's a little unethical. So he knows, like, he's created an ice Marcy of some of his own design to deal with the guilt of, or deal with the guilt or the loss or the lack thereof of Marceline in his life. And him doing something unethical for sure.
No, I 100% feel the same way. I mean, that was my theoretically speaking as well. It's just, he created her in the sweetest, least rebellious version of her, or like how he likes to remember her. Mm-hmm. And that's how he continued to remember her for 100 years hereafter is this. And there's, child Marceline, we don't know for sure, but her door is a gate. It looks like she's trapped in that room. She's happy to be that way because she's created out of ice, and she is the Simon's
doesn't know
creation.
Any better. Yeah,
but certainly is a prisoner here and is not really having free will by any means. And it's unfortunate. It really sucks, and I do think it weighs on him, despite the fact that he tries to play it off and tries to. I mean, even another unethical thing, or maybe not unethical, but another moment that where I was just like, dude, this dude is so sus. Is when we go into the laboratory when the Winter King brings Simon into the laboratory, gives him a suit because you looked ugly. I mean, fair, whatever. But he wasn't a scientist. I thought that was fascinating that this new Simon is a scientist. Yeah, which was interesting. But he's going to duplicate the crown, right? And Simon brings up Betty and is like, was there a Betty in this universe or whatever? And he straight up calls her the dead one and then laughs about it. And that just got me, man. I was like, dude, you suck. And again, maybe, who knows what happened or if he ever tried to get Betty back. I mean, it seems like he's moved on.
It's honestly, it could be one of those things that what we were saying about before, that his obsession with Betty could have been what was keeping him stuck in that state of wizard madness and wizard sadness, was that he was so hyper obsessed with Betty that maybe he could have defeated the crown. Maybe he could have overpowered it more, but his obsession with Betty is what kept him insane all those years. Even with the crown on, even though it was numbing the pain, he wasn't feeling it, that deep down, he wasn't going to be able to have the strength to better himself because he was just so caught up with, I'll never be complete without Betty. And so that's, in all other universes, we're not seeing, or at least haven't seen,
what actually happened, right?
Yeah,
we don't really know what happened with Betty.
Well, we kind of do.
Well, in this universe is what I'm saying. In this reality, like, it may not be the exact same thing that happened to our Simon Petrikov.
There's a good chance that maybe this universe is similar. I heard a theory too that it goes back to our Marceline, but it also goes back to when you were saying, okay, well, how did he said, over the sheer power of will, I transferred my madness over to her or whatever, or it got over the ice thing. There's a theory that Marceline, like in our prime, made a wish, went to Prismo's, wish thing at some point in time and made a wish. Hey, I wish that Simon wasn't mad anymore. And his monkey paw wish created this universe where Simon wasn't mad.
That's cool. Whoa.
Yeah. But the monkey paw of that was he, transferred the madness over to Princess Bubblegum, and it made Marceline so mad that she dies trying to, beat the new Wizard King, quote unquote. So that's a really cool
cool theory.
This is the byproduct of a monkey paw universe. Yeah.
I actually I don't know if that's what happened. I don't know if that's necessarily my personal house canon or head canon, but I think that's freaking cool.
I might treat it as my house canon. I don't think that's going to be, they can't, loose end every one of these universes on how they were created. So I'm going to keep that as my maybe, back pocket house canon there.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention earlier too, we got to see a little bit of how, like, for sure something's wrong with the Winter King is his name. I was like, that doesn't sound right.
There's so many mixed names at this point.
I was going to say Weather King. I know, right?
The Weather King.
No, but we get to see it when he goes and he makes this ice sword that has fighting powers. So Fiona isn't given the ability to fight by the magic. It's the sword itself helps the user of the sword to fight. So we'll see if maybe having those movements will help her later in the future, now that she's seen what to do or something.
Yeah.
But why I wanted to bring this up is Steve Wolfhard, who's a cartoonist and worked on this episode and I believe some other episodes. He has a great Twitter. I mean, if you don't follow him, you should definitely follow him. But he tweeted out that the red flashing diamond on that sword, which kind of activated to help her fight, right, is evidence that while Ice Prince appears completely sane, he still has some Ice King bug in his brain, even though he doesn't know it. So that's like one of the first clues that something is still kind of wrong with him. This unintended addition to the sword, perhaps, is that she can fight really well, or that the glowing red diamond or gem, there's something there that feels a little bit off. And of course, she loses the sword at the end of the day. So we'll see how she, moving forward, has any ability to fight, or if she's gotten any better at that. But she definitely learns a valuable lesson, right? This episode, she's just out there, Ned, just destroying candy people, banana guards,
cinnamon buns, Valentine's heart out, just
giant
smashing.
heart out.
Oh my gosh, yeah, rips the pastry's face off. Like, it's so brutal how they're not just like getting up there. They're like, how can I absolutely just wreck this universe? And I love not my tops of the episode, but I love at the end when Cake's like, we'll go look for him, like, as all the candy people are like crushed in a pile of back.
Yeah. Well, she finally comes to grips with like that she's just been hurting like innocent candy people, and she wasn't really living her dream. She felt like she was living her dream, and we've seen this in every episode before this too. Kate does the same thing with the marketplace, right? In that third episode, and Fiona goes in there, just like starts beats up a kid, that's just like eating a lollipop or whatever. And hopefully she's finally learning a lesson that, like, just because you can do these awesome magical things that you've always wanted to do doesn't mean that you should just do them at whim or just all the time on anyone. Yeah. Like, there needs to truly be purpose. And is she a hero, or is she being the bad guy?
Exactly. Is she being struggling with all these universes, like, freaking holocausts? Like, is she destroying things along the way, man? Like, well, and I think it's a huge good moment in the show here, kind of getting Fiona she's already 3-dimensional, obviously, but having her have kind of that hero's dilemma that Finn has. And Finn has it through the show, especially with the introduction of Fern, where, yeah, man, I can adventure and I can go cut and slash and beat bad guys, but like, what am I leaving in my wake? Like the pile of bodies, the pile of stories and lives that I've destroyed. Or he starts to be like, have moments in the show where he kind of self-implodes and is like, I don't know if I can be a hero anymore. I don't know, like, I've lost what if I kill this giant banana monster? For my fans, you know what I'm talking about from season 9. But kill this giant banana monster, and I don't want to. I don't want to kill things anymore, because I don't really know why this monster's evil, or why it's trying to is it trying to defend its family? Is it was it raised this way? Is this part of its essence and nature? And I think that Fiona, in a similar way, is doing that, but she's come from now this normal universe and seeing all these magical universes, and kind of coming into the baby verse, she's like, oh my gosh, this is not a video game. This is not, these are like real lives that I'm affecting. And so I think that we're going to have to deal with that in the next episode, where she's going to need to slice and dice some monster and go, hey, maybe we need to hear him out. Like, hey, maybe we need to settle this a little bit more diplomatically.
Well, I think she'll learn from Simon a little bit, because Simon has this, and maybe it's because straight up the Candy Queen is 100% doing or having done to her what Simon had done to him, right? Where he's like convinced that we don't need the fighter. There's a beautiful person inside. Let's figure it out. I mean, sure, she's taken this metaphor of like, I'm the key ingredient, and she's going to bake me into a cake or whatever.
Which I think is a great villain arc too. Great villain arc. That
the blender says 1, 2, kill.
Yeah. I love how in her song, which we don't have to talk about that much. It was a great song. I'm sure it was a Rebecca Sugar song too, but
yeah, probably
all of the things, like, she was like, oh, how many like frozen desserts, how many sweet treats can be made with ice and sugar? And that she wants to create all these desserts with his ice power. Now she can create frozen candy people, pretty much.
With herself? Was she gonna also put herself in the blender?
My theory was that she was gonna jump in the blender as well. Yeah, and that they were gonna mesh into one ultra powerful, like ice cream sandwich man or something like that.
You know, she's kind of got Willy Wonka vibes, man. A little bit of Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka
is she the sexiest character of this episode?
She might be the sexy character of the episode.
Oh no.
She definitely got somewhere between. It's like if you crossed Willy Wonka with Lemon Grab, and then you put those into one. Because all of her candy people too. Like we look at Simon's Ice Kingdom. Yeah, like the snowmen and stuff are like crude, but she's got all these like wonked up bananas, and everything kind of looks like messed up. And I'm like, that's way more like the Lemon Kingdom, as you'll see coming up soon, where they've created all these lemon people that are just nasty. Like they're gross. They're almost like Cronenberg, like, you know.
Do you think is there something there where I'm thinking back to the lemon carbs. They don't like all the smiley faces. Does it have something to do with, the bubblegum kingdom, or with that episode that you're talking about where they create their own like too perfect? I don't know. There's got to be a parallel there.
Yeah, we'll get to that later in season 5. Yeah. But I'm glad we're having the discussion now, because once we get to season 5, we can parallel it back to Fionna and Cake episodes, which again will be really fun to do for the rest of our review of A Normal Adventure Time.
One thing's for sure, though, the gingerbread cookie that we saw that Gary makes, right? We get to see a real one in this messed up bubblegum kingdom, and I'm guessing it's the Royal Tart Toter. I kind of hope it's not, because I feel so bad for him.
I'd assume that's the only gingerbread.
It looks horrible.
Yeah, but he's an evil Tart Toter.
Oh man, and freaking Simon's just like, wow, what a lovely metaphor. It's not a metaphor, dude. You're about to be an ingredient.
Man, so my tops of the episode was when the Winter King's pretty chill about the Candy Queen capturing him, and he's got all the marks in the background of like times I've been captured. But the best part is when in her song, when she opens up the curtains and reveals the giant mixer, and he goes, Is this normal? He goes, not this part. This is an escalation. Just the way that line was delivered was my for sure tops of the episode. And along with funny. My lovely was the gummy handcuffs when she was the gummy handcuffs on Simon. And I don't know. That's just my little fun lovely of the episode.
Yeah. Ned, I want to know your thoughts about the very end here when the crown loses its magic. And my thought is it's because it becomes in contact with Fionna, right? A non-magical person touching from another reality that doesn't mix with this reality or whatever. So anyways, the crown loses its magic. And instead of the Winter King just turning into Simon, goes from normal Simon to dust. Like he straight up dies. And I know the explanation probably has something to do with, it's because he was so many hundreds of whatever years old,
he was at least,
shouldn't still be alive. But then our Simon is still alive and he doesn't have the crown. Is it a spoiler? Does it have something to do with the spoiler that I haven't seen yet?
It would have been something that's already been spoiled. So you saw how when they were describing Simon becoming how he is now, that they were basically inside Golb and Golb was digesting them and stripping away their magic. It's because of that I think that Simon gets the magic stripped away. But because it was done in this weird magical Golb digestion, that he doesn't just like turn into a pile of bones. That this, though, remember in the song the episode we just reviewed with Marcy and Simon, where he's like, this crown, it's keeping me alive, but it's making me crazy. So if in our prime universe, if Simon or the Ice King had just lost his crown, or the crown had just lost its magic powers, that would have been what would have happened.
It's kind of like a simile to this could be if you're way deep diving in the ocean, right? And you've been there for a long time and nitrogen has filled up your blood or whatever that is, right? And when you come up too fast, you get the bends and you can die, right? Maybe it's a similar thing. It's like it's stripped away immediately. And therefore, but I think what you're saying is really the true reason for it is because of the magic being stripped away from Simon, as opposed to the crown that has the power is destroyed. And then, everything about him immediately goes back to what it would be.
It was pretty much just, done in two different ways. Very different ways of Simon losing the powers between our prime universe and this universe itself too. But
I think so. That's a good explanation for it. And I felt bad for Ice Marceline, and I really would love to see the moment when that Simon takes down Marceline in that universe. I mean, that would be pretty epic, I'm sure.
All of the loose ends that we are like, the potential loose ends, the potential questions that this show is going to arise, it might lead to another season of Adventure Time where it's just like Adventure Time season 11 multiversal madness, and we are going back and visiting random universes for 10 minutes and like getting backstory. Not anything like crazy canonical, but now we can go to the baby universe and have an adventure. Now we can go to this universe and watch Marceline make the wish with Prismo and die to the Ice King. You know, like we've got a lot more open-ended adventures we can have.
Dude, we got to spend some time in the baby world this next episode. Please. I got to see it. I mean, it's so
I hope we
cute.
do a little something. And then the theory of the baby, I don't know
Can we bring baby Finn with us? He just needs to come with us now.
Like, there was another thing, baby. The dark part of this episode is there was no Finn and Jake in this universe, or no version of a Fionna and Cake or Finn and Jake, and that the theory is probably the same, is that they probably tried to defeat new Winter King, and that they were either frozen, and so he's again created his perfect universe by freezing or killing anybody that opposed him.
Good grief, dude. I didn't even think about that.
Again, it's so many questions. I didn't think I'd leave this episode with this many extra questions, but
unethical.
I do have my large theoretically speaking, and
another one. What?
This is my big one of this episode. Oh my gosh! Possibly this comes into this episode. It's supported by a couple of different facts. So hear me out here. This might be more long-winded than I want it to be, but I'll try to sum it up quickly. In the episode crossover, spoiler drop, they open up in Kyridian portal. That lich-faced Jake from Farm World. They cut off his hand, and the hand falls into the multiverse, and you see the hand split into like 100 hands and go across the multiverse. Last time we even saw that happen was in crossover. No explanation for it. So that's absolutely the explanation why there's tons of different liches that we're now seeing in these random universes. There's just a lich in the background, but the lich is chilling, not doing anything evil, not doing anything crazy. That now kind of my theory is Prismo's Fionna and Cake universe that he created sitting outside of the web of the multiverse, right? I think that there's a potential that Fionna and Cake's universe is actually the central finite curve. And that all of these other, even our prime universe, which we're considering the central finite curve, is a variation of Prismo's Fionna and Cake created universe. Just because that's how time, if Prismo lives in this time room where time doesn't exist, the Fionna and Cake universe existed for all of time, correct? Now, the fact that the Lich his wish is to wish all life never existed in the universe, right? But that Fionna and Cake's universe wouldn't be touchable because it's not connected to the web of all these multiverses. And so that the Lich is now had learned that maybe from, in some way, shape, or form, learned that, my death is an inevitable amongst this created multiverse. So how do I destroy all multiverses? And it being Fionna and Cake is the universe he can't touch because it's disconnected, but he needs to destroy Fionna and Cake's universe because that's the central finite curve. If he just destroys that universe, then all the other universes disappear. That's only supported with this episode, and why I kind of got that was when Gary is talking about the what does he call it again? The sugar mention, the pastry mention. Yes. I was like, what if like even Gary's thought concept, the fact that he made up this pastry mention means that created a pastry mention, or that created our prime world where there is a candy kingdom. And there is that. Yeah. So I don't know.
That's an interesting theory. Yeah. I mean, I think if I'm coming at this from a limited point of view, but if I was to try to debate that or try to, be some sort of a counter argument to that, I would say, I think in the Prismo episode, we heard Prismo say that for eons, he was granting other people's wishes that were creating realities. And then he straight up says, So I decided to one day do it for myself. So he did give us a timeline. He gave us a pretty straight up, here's the timeline of what happened.
But he exists in the time room where time stems off of that. So him creating Fionna and Cake's universe wouldn't necessarily be on a timeline. It would have just happened. It would have just existed as kind of a creation. It wouldn't have been, at a certain point in time, Fionna and Cake's universe existed. It would have just always existed. If we're getting really into the time and space theory here. So it's just a possibility. I'm just going to put it out there as that's probably not 100% correct, but I would love to.
But there is still time outside of the time room. Like time still moves normally. I don't know.
Right, but if Prismo created Fionna and Cake in the time room and on his laptop, we saw him putting that universe into Simon's head to exist at that point in time. But at the same time, that universe again was created in a realm. It was where it wouldn't have been a specific point in time, I guess. But I don't know. That's getting way too Marvel shit with the time travel.
I think so, and I think if anyone has any like valid or like real arguments against that, feel free to send it to the Traveler's Log, which is nea.travelerslog@gmail.com. And we'd be happy to read them on the podcast, and we can talk about that a little bit further. But I don't know, Ned. I don't think you sold me on it, but I like where your head is at. I think that theoretically speaking is good. I think it's just, we just need more evidence. We just need way more evidence.
I got one piece of evidence in this episode, and my mind ran amok. So I am not trying to defend that any further. And I 100% invite you to shred my theory to pieces.
But that's possible. The thing, right? Our theoretically speakings are meant to be, here's my thought. Here, like this could be way off. And I think in this podcast, you are fully valid to have whatever theoretically speaking you want. And if it comes true, that would be freaking crazy, dude. Because
that would be
fun. You have a good point with Gary and his pastry mentioned. I mean, it is straight up the Candy Kingdom.
And he starts telling the story of Slumber Party Panic. So like, because that universe is one that's created by Prismo, does it have the ability to affect / create / stem off timelines of those universes that exist? I don't know.
I got one. I got a theory right here,
give it to now. Me. Lay it on me, baby.
This is all Ice King fan fiction in Prime Universe. He's just making all of this up as we go.
All right, that would be such an ex machina, like to the end of the series. Oh my! Then just Ice King closes a book and says, "Well, thanks for listening, everybody." I would be so pissed. Yeah, don't even manifest that, Russell.
And what's your lesson for this episode?
My lesson from this episode is making something wonderful is as hard as manifesting your own reality.
Okay.
That's as simple as that. We already discussed it already. It's not simple. It's not making something wonderful is not as simple as manifesting your own reality. It's really freaking hard, but
it can be hard.
Usually it does lead to something wonderful.
Yeah. I like that. That's good. Mine is, even internet comedy icon Brian David Gilbert isn't safe from becoming a bad guy. That is my first lesson. My second lesson is perhaps the true lesson of this episode is that even with good intentions, the outcome may speak differently from your own actions, which is kind of speaking to the Winter King. So
yeah, that's very, very much like an ends don't justify the means mentality there too. And your first lesson is
or the other way around. The means don't justify the ends. In a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I think isn't that whole argument supposed to be like cyclical as well?
Yeah.
But to your first lesson though, I was like, oh, you either die the hero or you voice act long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah, or you live. What is it? You live long enough to see yourself become a giant pastry from a potentially sexy Willy Wonka.
Potentially sexy Willy Wonka.
I don't know. I don't know.
If we've got so much on this episode, I really, really tried my hardest not to watch the next one before recording because I did not want any of my
I haven't either.
Like theories to be put to bed or be like, oh, I don't want to drop a spoiler for next week or whatever. So I literally might turn around and watch that one tonight.
Oh, I'm definitely watching the next episode today as well. Just to prepare. Well, Ned, I mean, do you have a wrap this week? Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, I did. Oh, at home, what was my recommendation? Oh, I had a good one. What was yours? Let me fester on it for a second because I thought I had a really good one.
I've got a prereq because I haven't done this yet, and also be careful, you can still get pregnant from prereqs. I am going to it's the 9th annual Japanese Moon Viewing Festival, and I don't know anything about it other than Japanese culture, and it's at Cheekwood, which I'm pretty excited to go to because I've never gone to Cheekwood. It's like the botanical gardens, I want to say, here in Nashville. So excited to check that out. And I think that's I'm going to love it. So that's my prereq.
Nice. Well, so your prereq, but not your actual rec.
Well, it's my rec. It's a prereq because I haven't done it yet. So I'm recking it prior to.
In case it just accidentally is just terrible or anything.
Yeah, it may be horrible.
Too.
I mean, I don't know.
Shoot, man, my recommendation, I'm going to do a broad one just because this week's been so fantastic. It's just fall, autumn. It's just fantastic. Like literally this whole week, I don't know how it's been for you guys. It's definitely down here in the South, but it's been so freaking hot this summer that like being outside and getting like cool air breezes. We'll walk the dogs today. That like this is far and away my most favorite time of year. Like, and it is. And so get out. Maybe a recommendation is if you got a cool breeze where it's jeans and hoodie weather, go outside, go make a fire, go watch some football, go drink a beer while you're smoking outside, because I realized that like I've been missing that for the last like 6 months because I've been sweating too much.
Yeah. I like it, man. I'm in it. I mean, we freaking had a whole episode about fall on the Patreon. So I am here with you. And I think that's a good rec.
It's good rec.
Well,
good rec.
Thank you all so much, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Never Ending Adventure podcast. I mean, we'll be back as soon as we can with the next episode of the series. And we're both pumped. We're both loving this. I know y'all are as well. We've talked about it on the Patreon. We've got a Discord for anyone who subscribes to that. And we've had some good conversations with people about this series. And it seems like that, like unanimously, we're all really enjoying this whole thing. So it's awesome. Anyways, check us out on Instagram at Never Ending Adventure Podcast, TikTok at Never Ending Adventure Cast, Twitter at NEA_podcast. Email us your thoughts, your opinions, your theories. Argue with our theories at NEA.travelerslog@gmail.com. Man, I mean, I'm pumped. Ned, we'll be talking soon. We got to do a Patreon podcast episode where we're, the NEA and beyond pretty soon here.
Yeah, we do got to do NEA and beyond for all you Patreoners out there, for all you lovelies and sexies.
The most lovelies and sexies, not to say that people just listen to us aren't as well, but I mean, they are the most. So, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
anyways,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. All right. Anyways, party forever.
Oh, I love you guys.